as the recipients of those stories, and whether they stack up actually. And I think it's very interesting how the progression has moved just in the last couple of years, because I found it quite interesting. On the one hand, I think there's less greenwash going on, I have to say, and I'll hopefully demonstrate a bit of this. But I was intrigued by the introductory comments about how during the recession, some, let's call them sustainable issues, have receded into the background. My experience is absolutely the opposite, I have to say. That what we're finding is that there has been a huge increase in pressure within organisations to focus on sustainability, no longer as adjunct to business, but to make it pay for business. Pressure from the chief executive is normally now, yeah, we're not going to cut your budget, but show me what it delivers. Pure and simple. And that's kind of the territory that we're working in with organisations where they're not as good, I have to say, as Interface Floor, who have got an incredibly sophisticated and clear-sighted view of what sustainability means. The reality in the real world is where organisations are getting to grips with it in a slower way, maybe a little bit piecemeal, making a couple of steps, stumbling a little bit, and making another few steps. And so we're often helping organisations with that battle as well. We'd love to have 100 Interface Floors as our clients, but they don't exist. The reason I've got this title up here, and I'm going to use pictures to, because I'm last and it'll make it easier when I do, I was going to be last, so there's no excuse. But I've got this title because it's quite melodramatic, and more importantly, it's because of who it comes from. This is the other reason why, I think you can read that, so it's not very good, I'll tell you the basics of it. This is the other reason why I think chief executives are now getting interested in this. Most importantly, there have been two pieces of research coming from ING and from Goldman Sachs this year that have signalled what they are viewing pretty much as a tipping point, that sustainability issues are now needing to be factored into investment issues. And I've always come at this agenda from a point of view of interest, belief, but also, I have to say, a little bit of scepticism that it won't actually gain traction until the money is behind it. I have to say, I now think that this organisation is demonstrating that there is a shift taking place. ING, not SRI, not kind of subset of ING, this is the core equity markets research team, has put a piece together called the Third Industrial Revolution, describing how what they call the 8 interdependent crises of demography, ethics, social economic, food, water, climate, energy and political will create a third industrial revolution that will transform the way that brands are positioned in the marketplace. I've got it here if anyone wants reference for it. It is really interesting, and it's one of those that I've been showing to chief executives and they're actually reading it. It's like kind of like, oh yeah, this kind of matters, doesn't it? And they're talking about a whole range of interesting concepts that address life cycle assessment, they address supply chain, and they address marketing. How do products market themselves as a result of these crises? What's it going to mean to them? The explosion in demography. What is water crisis, water conflict going to mean for them? Huge issues for pretty much every brand we know and love. My thanks also to Olivia, who's helping with a couple of these slides. This is a nice one, which is just about greenwash and how I think business itself has done itself a huge disservice in the way that it has used things like carbon credits, CO2 neutral, all of these concepts that we use to kind of dress up improvements in process. To be honest, mostly bullshit. I think people are now concluding. A couple of years ago, you might have seen this. Ford actually put together a national advertising campaign with Kermit for no other reason than the fact that this was an eco-efficient four-wheel drive that they were promoting. So there was an ad running just 3 years ago in the US. Kermit was the main feature, the line being, "It's not easy being green." It's like, that would not happen now, just 3 years ago. That was. So I think there's been a big, big shift. They also had the Ford logo at the end, which went from blue to green, and kind of transformed in your eyes. It's like, you wouldn't get away with it, pure and simple. So I don't think we're actually in that world. I think we're in a place where businesses are putting together more sophisticated stories, and I think, basically, if you look at the big brands out there, they are stories. They are telling us a whole different range of dimensions about themselves. And it's for us to judge whether we like that story, whether we trust that story, do we go and engage with that story and check it out. It's pretty much what we're trying to do. And I think that's what Interface Floor are doing, is putting together an incredibly strong story that their audience can engage with and use, basically. And that's something what we're in the business of doing. Key thing is they have to check out, and it's for us to test that. The classic examples recently, until I think it was the summer of last year, Pret, not necessarily sustainable, but had a whole range of values associated with it, about goodness, about freshness, about They say on the packaging, it's only good stuff, just made today. Suddenly a journalist looks into where the chicken is coming from. It's being mass-produced, battery farmed in Brazil, frozen, flown all the way across the world to frets around the UK and wherever else they're being distributed. Also supplying McDonald's. Pret ain't fresh stuff. Pure and simple, they got busted. And they had to put their hands up, remove all chicken sandwiches and address that. So that is a story that doesn't stack up. They haven't thought it through. They've made claims that are not justified when you look at the processes behind them. And it's for us to test that. Very interestingly also, Ben & Jerry's, often regarded as one of those pure ethical brands, was also actually recently exposed because of over-claiming about the ingredients of its products. The milk is not fair trade, the milk is not organic, the milk is mass farmed in America and shipped. They then admitted that and said, we will be addressing that in the future. But they almost benefited from this halo of being Ben & Jerry's, and the storytelling has been so good that it's covered up some of the crap, to be honest. And just having a good story actually isn't enough, I would argue. If you look at Body Shop, ought to be absolutely brilliant. They've been there for years, it's what they do, it's what they sell, it's what they stand for, it's what we know them for. Actually, if you look at the Body Shop recently and seen what they're selling, it's basically on price. They no longer push ethical values. The story has completely lost its way. You could argue till the cows come home about the value and the worthiness of what's going on behind the scenes of Body Shop. Are they telling it to us as a story? Absolutely not. They're shifting product for a low price at the moment. So I think, again, you can get a story very wrong. And they're actually starting to reevaluate some of this at the moment because they realise they've lost their way. And it's not due to being owned by L'Oreal, actually. L'Oreal are the people who have said to Body Shop, you have lost your way, go get it right, go sort it. So it's interesting that L'Oreal are applying pressure to the Body Shop to improve their positioning around their ethical values. It's L'Oreal saying, you're not doing it right. Different ways of telling stories, we come on to this. Actually, life cycle assessment for me is a story. It's the science-based version of the story. It's a very robust, fact-based, very importantly, way of telling the story about how the product is either produced or delivered or created for consumers. So there are lots of different ways of creating these. I think life cycle assessment is a particularly strong one. We've been working with Henkel recently on this, where they're looking at it. But equally, and this is the test where the geezer bit has to work with the geek, and which absolutely we would be in favour of. We aren't at the argument, we aren't doing kind of dressing up with this. It's very important that if you're coming up with a good story, it should effectively, it should either be the starting point for a story, or it should change the product itself. So if you're coming up with a story, it can actually change the way you develop products, the way you shape your business model. And I would suggest that's absolutely what's happened at Interface Floor over the years, is that mission has shaped 1,000 decisions as a result of it that have led into new products, new ways of selling product, new ways of managing the business. And that's what it should do, actually. And I'd say there's one other very good example to look at, which would be Patagonia, who are absolutely telling the story of all their product. So this bit here tells you about the good, what's great in the product, what have they done that's worked, what is sustainable, the bad. They tell you the bits that they haven't been able to sort, the bits of the product, the chemicals that are in there that they haven't been able to eliminate, the amount of travel that has been used in some instances. So they'll tell you, we've sorted this, we haven't sorted this bit, but then they'll tell you what we think, what are we trying to do, what are we exploring, what are we investing in, what could we change. That's an example of an organisation that has thought through the story, made it transparent, so we can evaluate for ourselves. Because I don't think this is actually all about being whiter than white. It's about explaining what can and can't be done. We are not going to stop buying stuff as consumers. What we will probably do is make more realistic assessments over what we think an organisation can and can't do to improve it. This is the point about when you should change a product, though, is that Patagonia, very interestingly, then decided to go into surfing gear. Absolutely fundamentally, decided not to go into fashionable surfing gear, because the point is they want to make durable products that aren't having to be bought every year or every 2 years. They make ones that last for 10 years. So you don't get Patagonia trendy gear, you get Patagonia practical clothing for surfing, which will last even 5 years. The point is it shouldn't be a fashion item that then gets thrown away at the end of the year and then we suddenly have to buy another one. So very interesting that it shaped the way they developed the product. That's what it should do. It's a good story that's informing the way the business is being managed, which is, I think, where interface law comes in as well. The big challenge in all of this, and this is where we can be very judgmental, and there are kind of a few tests in here, and if anybody disagrees with me vehemently, please shout, because that's what they're there for. What comes first? Can you sort the story and then go and sell it? Or can you be given the grace of 10 years to gradually improve what your organisation does? Because not everybody can just transform stuff overnight, or have the epiphany that took place in an organisation like Interface Law. I would argue H&M have a garden collection, they also have an organic cotton collection. What are they doing here really? Is it changing the way they do the rest of their business? Is it changing where they source their materials from? Is it changing the way they sell to consumers? I don't think it's any of those things. I think it's a direct, opportunistic response to a small section of society wanting this type of product. So on that basis, I'd say this is pure commercialism. It's not sustainable thinking within an organisation. I say that guardedly as well. They are a client of ours. So, they are doing some very good things in supply chain, but they are not developing their products with the whole sustainability story in mind. They're developing a subset to sell to a subset. So they're not changing society at all. M&S, tougher one, this one. Most people in the Giza world would say one of the best communication stories of the last 5 years. Scratch beneath the surface, actually, and they've got a whole load of commitments that just haven't budged. They haven't changed a ton of stuff in their commitments. It's still exactly where it was 3 years ago when it was launched. Some bits are very good, some bits are very, very flaky. I think it's an interesting one that's almost on the cusp. They've gone a long way. I would argue actually that M&S, because of its role in our society in particular, ought to be way ahead of where it is. It should have been doing this 10 years ago, and it should have been educating the market and educating society on what sustainable produce, what sustainable food actually means. So they should be, because of their role in our psyche, telling us, educating us, what is this actually all about? They're not doing that, they're just trying to benefit from the comms. This is one that we work on, so I'll make no bones about this. I think energy businesses are in a very interesting place. We're not going to stop buying energy. What's very interesting is that E.ON have reached a conclusion that they were getting to a stalemate, that they were either waiting for regulators to change the market so that they could sell more green energy, or they were waiting for consumers to decide that it was the right thing to spend more money to buy green energy. Now, neither of those things are going to happen. You've got E.ON wanting to develop its business model in line with regulators and with consumers, creating more pressure for green energy. They are not going to happen. Regulators are not going to take a punt on any single energy source, because they're not allowed to European legislation. Consumers don't want to spend more. So where is the pressure going to come from? And E.ON have finally concluded that what they need to do is to lead the debate. So they're now viewing in their minds, they are an educator of society about the energy debate. So they've now launched, you'll see, all of the campaigns that run in the UK now are around this concept of talking energy, which is about creating a debate about the future of energy, which is also tied into their Energy Fit campaign that now runs on TV. So it's fully integrated, and I would argue this is an organisation that may not be whiter than white by any means, but is doing quite a good job given where it's starting from. So it's all about trajectory, actually, I think, about where you can get to and what you can achieve. And the psyche of what they're trying to do. Are you changing society or just selling more product? I think there's another one put in here as well, which just demonstrates that we're all kind of children at heart and sometimes not comfortable with it as well. This is an example of an absolutely sustainable product, and a product that could completely transform millions of other products, and yet we are not comfortable with what it's all about. And it's quite closely tied to GM, but it's not that. It's an organisation called Novozymes who develop enzymes that can go into literally hundreds, thousands of other products. And yet, when you start talking about what the enzyme does and how it creates sustainability, people become very uncomfortable with it. At a very simple level, it could be something like enzymes going into washing powders that have enabled people like Ariel to promote their Wash at 30 campaigns. That's great, I don't think we have a problem with that. You then start talking about enzymes going into foodstuffs in Africa, which mean that they release more nutrients in basic corns and maize and products like that. People start to get very uncomfortable with what that's doing. It's about kind of re-engineering of nature. Actually, that would be one of the single fastest ways to reduce poverty in Africa, is to place enzymes into the basic crops that are being produced. And yet, we're not doing it. Why the hell is that? The science was there 5, 10 years ago, and yet they're not making any ground in terms of selling the product. And it's because the mindset just isn't there about some of these actually incredible scientific, sustainable solutions that we're not comfortable with as consumers, or the science still scares the hell out of us. There's also innovation. We mentioned this. How do we educate? I think there are a couple of really nice examples now about how consumers can get more information. There are iPhone apps. You go into a store, you either type in the barcode details, or you go onto the iPhone app and find out about the product, and it will give you that background. These things are helping. Technology will become our friend in educating us about what is and isn't right. I think we will see in a couple of years' time, probably regulatory, if not, then it will be competition-led, the requirement for main consumer products to have traceability audits. So you go online, and every product you buy from Unilever you will see a traceability audit. You will see where it was farmed, how far it was shipped, the ingredients that went into it. Was there palm oil in it? And Unilever got busted on that one. And you will see that online, and I think every organisation that produces FMCG-type products will have to publish that. If it's not EU, I think because there are a couple of competitors who are going to do it, it will drive the market. One of those is Coca-Cola. They produced this product last year, which is at its early stages called Trace Your Coke. In the UK only, type in the barcode of your Coke can or bottle, it shows you where it was manufactured, where the water came from, how far it's travelled. Now, it's just early days. They're developing a much more sophisticated version in the background. It's a little bit PR-ish at the moment, but it's actually the workings behind it are becoming really quite sophisticated. So I think it's not as good as simple as good and bad. I think absolutely the most robust way of doing this is on the whole story, where we are able to see into the workings of a business. It's not about saying absolutely good, absolutely bad. It's do we trust the direction this organisation is travelling in? I think the storytelling bit is a very important bit. It can be scientific stories, it can be marketing stories, but we can assess what's there. Technology is there, it's helping us now. I don't think there's that much really pure greenwash going on now. There's somebody who talked recently, I think it was the chief executive of the co-op, was talking about there's a big shift from trusting big organisations to trusting trusted organisations. We no longer just trust big because they are big. We are really questioning that now. I think the example that Mr. Placeball sets is absolutely brilliant. But I would now say, partly as a result of the investment community, basically, there is a huge swathe of businesses travelling in the wake of this now, and it's going to move quite quickly because actually it is now where the money is going. It's no longer going to be the marketing guys and the purists who are going to drive it. Investors are now shifting their attention to this and making the market change. So I think it's quite interesting time. Thank you.
Thank you very much.